That's an
Well,
awfully
Brian,
long name to put on a monogram.
But very apropos, I'm afraid. But thank you, Eric, for thinking about that.
Hey,
it's
that's
harder
what
to
happens
edit
when
these
you're in the Zoom world. You have to use the technology to your advantage.
We're all going to have this all figured out by the time we stop using Zoom.
We're not going to ever stop using Zoom. I'm sorry to tell you that.
Yeah, probably not. So the historic preservation thing sounds wonderful. And I guess we're kind of waiting to see what you hear back, Eric, but also I think we should make an effort to pursue it anyway.
Yeah.
You know, it makes damn good sense. And it fits along with all the other stuff we've been talking about. Which brings us, Katie, if you think we've covered the Claremont Academy and Greg, if you think we've covered that adequately, we'll move along.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Eric a quick question on the grants that he's looked at. Do any of those include possibility for property acquisition? Just out of curiosity.
Oh, I haven't dug deep into it. The grant is just for, at this point, creating a certificate program in African American historical preservation.
Okay.
But there's
again, my thought is, you know, the sites that you're talking about, the ones that still exist are rare and underappreciated, and again, in order to preserve them, a number of them need to be acquired by the right people.
Yeah, that's true.
Hey, Greg, while you're on that subject, you want to talk about the church?
Yeah, again, I don't talk a lot about it because I don't want to give certain people the indication that it's as significant as it is. But yes, Historic New Richmond here in New Richmond, we are in the process, actually we're in litigation over acquiring a historic Black church here in New Richmond, the Second Baptist Church, which was the meeting place of the Union Association for the Advancement of the Colored Men of New Richmond, which dates to 1857. It was a Black self-help group, which has a phenomenal history and significant history. And we've tried to acquire that property in order to preserve it and preserve its history. And so that's the question about the acquisition, is that we've been in mediation before and got nowhere. So we're going headlong into trial, and we think we will prevail. But I like 100% certainty in these things, not leave things to chance.
We're planning on building a class around the restoration of that building. So fingers crossed.
So Greg, does your city or region have a preservation agency? Does your city have a preservation? Does a region have? I know Cincinnati has a preservation association. I just don't know.
Yeah, well, we've worked with Cincinnati Preservation and its former entity, Miami Purchase, back in the day. Okay. And so we have basically a landmark ordinance to basically doesn't have as much teeth as I would like it to have, but it is focused on, again, encouraging people to properly preserve and maintain its historic character of properties that are on the Ohio Historic Inventory here in the village. And we did this work back in the 1980s, and it prevents properties from being destroyed due to floods and other disasters, and it exempts them from FEMA regulations that push property owners to do that sort of thing. So it had an unseen benefit when we did this work back in the 80s.
Okay. The reason I asked that question is I've got looped into the Cincinnati Preservation Association. There's a subcommittee that's focusing on African American history. So
awesome.
There'd be a way to kind of connect the entities together to get more leverage, to figure out what we can do to work together and stop working in these little silos from a regional perspective.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
That's pretty much it, Brian. We're hoping to get a judgment prior to trial, but everything is moving with the breakneck speed of government right now.
Yeah, I think Scott would echo that when it comes to the Taylor Mansion too. Because, and both of those projects are so exciting when it comes to minority history and underserved communities and that kind of stuff. I just can't wait to get started. Light the fuse, buddy. Which kind of brings us to the research topics. And I think I can get some students to work on these as perhaps independent studies or parts of projects, or they might be good articles. The first one is Mary Lumpkin. And I think most of you know about Mary Lumpkin. Oh, good, David's here. Hello, David. You should see the agenda. We're on research topic C, local. We're just talking about Mary Lumpkin. Most of you know Mary Lumpkin was a enslaved woman who was the mistress of a man by the name of Henry Lumpkin, who had 8 children with him. He owned the largest auction house for enslaved people in Richmond, Virginia, in Virginia. And when he died, she inherited his property and turned his property into a school for African Americans, formerly enslaved people. The strange thing is, however, she's buried in New Richmond, Ohio. And we suspect that because it said that she was there because she went to live with her a family member, a daughter, who was in New Richmond. And I would bet you dollars to donuts right now that it's because she sent her kids to the Parker Academy, because that was the only place they could get an education. And so I think some research needs to be done to find out if we can document that the Lumpkins were there. Another interesting part of this is that some of the enslaved people that belonged to the Taylors at the Taylor Mansion were also Lumpkins. Not knowing if there was a blood connection or it was just a matter of they happened to be owned by the Lumpkins before they were sold, and they were given the last name of Lumpkin. But ironically, in 1870, when Mary Lumpkin founded her school in Virginia, the first African-American school opened in Newport in the 1870s with the help of the former enslaved Lumpkin family. So, that's just too bizarre to be a coincidence, I think. Whether they were related by family or circumstance, I think that there's a story there that needs to be explored. In addition to that, you all saw on Inauguration Day that Joe Biden unveiled a painting by Richard Duncanson, who is a Cincinnati African-American artist, considered a master artist. His wife was a graduate of the Parker Academy. Her name was Phoebe Taylor, and she was the daughter of a slave owner and a slave woman, supposedly from Maysville. James Taylor had a brother that lived in Maysville, and her parents actually fell in love and moved to Ohio so they could live as man and wife. So that's something that's worth looking into as well. So, I mean, the ground is ripe for digging some of these stories out. Also, we talked about, there's a number of buildings that Scott, I know that you talked about that need research. One of them is that potentially earlier Black church. There's also the church that still exists. The building still exists. It's not the same congregation, but it was a abolitionist church where James Taylor's wife, Keturah Taylor, belonged to, and they were very active in the Underground Railroad, and we'd like to find those records if we can find them, because I have convinced myself, shall we say, that I think that the enslaved people at the Taylor Mansion were running an Underground Railroad operation right under the nose of James Taylor with the complicit help of Keturah, because of some certain stories I've heard that just seem to fit that narrative. But that's something that needs to look at, which means we need to find where the rest of those records are. And of course, we've already talked about the National Register for the Academy, and we've talked about Eric and the historic preservation for Black African-American sites.
Well, and back to the idea of tracking those records. The other thing is that we found Burl Lumpkin living in 1869, just around the corner from where the Southgate Street School is, which could most conceivably have been, we're doing a deed search on it now, Taylor land that was given to him when James Taylor died and freed his slaves. And so that building does still exist. It's on the same street on where we suspect the church was. And it's just right outside of the Taylor estate, what was the Taylor estate at the time, in the city proper. So there's some of those connections that we're trying to link into and trying to use what public records we can. The other resource for that research are a lot of paperwork that's actually at the Steele Library that has not been properly researched for the type of things that we're looking for. Sorry, Brian, I interrupted you.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's fine, Scott. And this is why this all falls under low-hanging fruit. And all this stuff could be a publication. It could be, a program. It could be, one of the things that Dr. Miller and I have been talking about is videos, short 5-minute historical videos that could be used on our website or other websites, to promote some of these things, to reach new audiences. Scott, do you want to bring us up to speed or talk a little bit about the Southgate School basement?
Sure. So the State African American Action Fund grant that Eric applied for, we applied earlier this year for renovation of the Southgate Street School basement, most notably the girls' bathroom, which we have stories about the girls having recess in the bathroom, but also the significance of the fact that indoor plumbing was brought in 1910 when lots of other properties, residential and business properties, were still using privies. Also, the ability to expand our footprint in the museum by moving to the basement. A lot of work has been done by the developer that tore down the 4th Street School as part of their commitment for being able to do that. But what this grant would allow us to do is be able to open up that lower section for larger community meetings, for classes. And it would be a great opportunity to utilize as a classroom for things such as historic preservation, both the African American Historic Preservation Program, and also to be able to teach people more about their buildings and how they function and the significance of this building being built at the time that it was. And that would increase our capacity, would double our capacity and double our meeting space, especially in the time where we all need to be distanced, but also within an actual African-American site that has seen so many years of existence. Is that what you wanted to hear, Brian?
Yeah, it's exactly what I wanted to hear.
Okay.
So,
Oh,
and that
I'm
will be,
sorry. The last thing I'll say is we were a finalist for this grant last year and missed out on it. So So we're hoping that both programs will get funded this year. Now I'm done.
It's just that that's an ongoing project that again, will move ahead even if we don't get funding on. Because it's important to get that part open. So if you haven't seen the Southgate School lately, take a drive by. It looks beautiful on the outside. It's been painted. And I know that Scott's been talking to the developer about getting the cornice put back on, and we'll look forward to that happening as well in the not too distant future. I'm going to put you on the spot again, Scott, because the next thing on the agenda is the Taylor Mansion.
Okay.
And I did put in there that it's stalled because of it's in court and waiting for some things to be decided. But I think we can still move forward. One of the things that we need to do is if we are going to do a dig in the basement, we need to plan for it, not only what that would look like and how it could be paid for. And I know that Jennifer and Vanessa have been talking about this because Jennifer is heading this up sort of as her capstone for the public history program. Because even though she has a doctorate, she's slumming to come back to work with us. So more to it. But we're excited about the potential of learning about the enslaved people that lived and worked in that space. So Scott, do you want to throw some of your thoughts in there as well, please?
Sure. Part of this is this is a property that we're committed to being able to acquire. And of course, Resolve has a lot to do with it, but the practicality too. The problem is it's a real legal quagmire right now. It's not a very simple legal situation for the banks, and it's actually in federal court as opposed to local court. So it moves at a snail's pace due to what's going on. But we're dedicated to the idea that being prepared so that the argument gets stronger and stronger. Every time I talk to the city leaders, I talk about when we acquire the property, not if, and keep getting their buy-in of their commitment. So we're committed to doing this, even if it takes raising money to do it as opposed to a donation. But it's the solid idea. Brian's students have started with a plan as to how we would utilize the overall space, but I think laying plans as to how we would gain more information and be able to proceed with finding out more about the enslaved individuals, more about the building and the land itself. That strong plan is what's going to, when we're in the position to, whether we have to bid for the house or whether we have to forcefully ask for it, is to be able to say, we know exactly what we're going to do with this. We know how it's going to benefit the community and really the nation as a whole for what we can do with this. And that strong plan is what's going to be able to help us carry through to have it to be able to implement the plan.
So is the house on a historical register, Scott?
The house is individually listed on the National Register. It's also part of the Mansion Hill National Register District. And it is a landmark property in the city of Newport.
So was it registered based on its African-American content or its historical or what?
No, it's based upon its historical and architectural because it was designed by, the original house was designed by Benjamin Latrobe. So, and also the context as being the founder of Newport's house. I think at the time that it was put on the register, which I believe was in the 70s, they were most of the register nominations were based upon architecture or the great men theory. So, but I think the fact that the narrative has always included the fact that James Taylor was a slaveholder, but also the fact that when he originally came to town, he brought 2 slaves and an indentured servant with him, gives us a lot of context that we can weave into being able to get more recognition on the National Register.
Well, I raised that question because 2 things. Number one, I'm on the Kentucky Historical Preservation Board, Review Board. And I think if you want to try to get dollars that are connected to African-American history and culture or social justice issues, my suggestion would be to recertify the house with an African-American perspective. And if you need help doing that, I could run and buy Linda at the state to see how that would be done for a facility that's already on the National Register.
That sounds like a great project too for a student that
Yeah.
that has an interest in this to be able to help us get that. And maybe Catherine can give us a better idea. But you know, I'm sure that that's certainly would be an enhancement to this when we see what's happened with other great properties of great men, such as Taylor and Monticello, and how they've managed to refocus the significance of properties based upon all of the people that lived and worked within the community, and not just the people whose name was over the door.
The other thing that, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I recommend that could, I mean, definitely qualify for an underrepresented communities grant, which since it's already a register nomination, that money could go directly towards supplementing research to expanding the nomination. And the folks in that office, I mean, people don't apply for those grants enough, so they always have extra money. And they leave the definition of underrepresented communities very broad. So they're always looking for projects like this one. And I think it would have a really good chance of getting money towards that research. And the deadline's March 31st, just to let you know.
Katie, can you send us a link to that? Katie works in the Park Service Office of Diversity. So she's in the right place to know. So if you could send me a link to that, that's something we should pursue. Also, I wanted to mention that when we do this project at the Taylor Mansion, it's got to be very, very inclusive. And we've even talked, and I know Jennifer, you talked about working with some high school kids as taking part in the dig, and perhaps putting together trips to Montpelier and to Monticello and those places where similar digs have taken place or are currently taking place. I think we've already got a really great relationship with the Newport schools, and Anthony Watts, who's the African-American superintendent of that. And I think that he would love this. Also, Burke and I have a list of high school history teachers that we've been working with, that I'm sure that they would all love to find a way to take part in this as well.
I think that's just knowing what the state requirements are, and knowing how we can sort of craft this so it will be meaningful to the teachers would be great. And those are easy to find, right? Like we can do Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky. So like we've got like ready markets for that. And so I think that's really important. I think they do U.S. history in Ohio. They do it in 8th grade.
We also have David Childs here, who is the
David knows more than I do.
NKU director of social studies education, or at least the guy over there in the education department that does this kind of stuff.
Yeah, you're right. It's 8th grade. Yes, that's true. So yes.
Is that true for elsewhere? Like I know it's true in Ohio, but
for the most part, it's true for Kentucky as well. That around that late middle school So when they do US history, yes. But nowadays with the Kentucky standards, you could potentially talk about it throughout because it's more broad now with the new standards that just came out in 2019. So yeah.
And I know in Ohio, they have that government requirement, and that can take
Right.
anytime from sophomore to senior year.
Exactly.
So it's, yeah. So I think that there's potential for that for Ohio high school kids as well. And
Right.
again, I'm not familiar with, so I'm trying to get there, right? We're trying to do some more of that. I'm trying to push our history department that way because we do so much training of the people who are looking for AYA licensure.
Right.
So I'm trying to make sure that I'm familiar with that, so I know what they need. But yeah, but in terms of like the
Awesome.
trip, I actually thought about that as a sort of training ground for the public history students. Do a summer trip and take them to various sites, so that they could actually sort of see how that works, and talk to the people behind the scenes. I mean, I have a former student from the Mount who works. She's worked in public history. She got her degree at George Washington. She's worked in public history over in DC for probably the last 10 years. And right now she's at Arlington Cemetery.
Wow.
So yeah, she's a little powerhouse. I love her. I go see her every summer. So, so we have an in.
Exciting. And this is, this project and this dig, we talked to, Chris, Chris and I and rest of us have talked about using some of this new technology that he has to be able to document this dig and the stuff that's found. And kind of excited about the potential of working that into a full interpretation of the building when the time comes. So it's just the excitements. But like I said, I think we kind of know what we want to do, and we need to have our partnerships in place. I feel we have a very strong partnership with the Cincinnati Museum Center and the Historic Preservation Office people here, and even in the informatics people. But if you can think of other people that we should be connecting with, by all means, let's get them talking to us. Okay. Terrific. Anything else we want to talk about when it comes to the Taylor Mansion dig or the interpretation? Scott, anybody? Mark?
I have to go to the next meeting. I'm very sorry, but I will say that I really like that idea of recertifying places to include their Black history, and the Taylor Mansion seems like a great place to start with that. And I also just want to kind of endorse as soon as Chris's app or software is ready, we are ready with podcast that can be place connected to Newport history. So there's lots of material that can be uploaded once and we can start trying that stuff out. And to whatever extent that classes can be involved in that would be great. I mean, we can talk to Matt Albritton about photography classes. We identify key sites that we want to upload first. We can get perhaps photo students to take pictures of it. Just what would we need? But that I just second Scott's point that if you're looking for a place to demonstrate it, we've got the content options. We have some strong content to get started and build from there.
Yeah, just so you all are aware, this idea actually bubbled to the surface of my brain walking around Newport. So Newport's my first focus, my primary focus with respect to the history side of this product. So I'm in 100%. I'm just trying to crack the whip on my external team, who are authoring the software, and trying to keep that boat moving, so that, we have something to actually house all this information in.
Thanks, Mark. I really appreciate it. Guess he's gone. Mark has got lots of the connections that I don't think of, and I'm grateful for his indulgence. Hang on a minute, I gotta.
Well, and so, Chris, I appreciate what you're saying. I think we're all ready to jump on this. Once you do all the heavy lifting, we're all ready to be able to help you add in the pieces for this. But you're doing something the rest of us can't do and can't manage to get to put together. So thank you for that. And yeah, I think there's even resources that we have as extensive as Mark has been working on stuff that we still haven't tapped that we have here in Newport to be able to do this. And part of that is the exhibit that Brian's exhibit class students are working on that we'll be rolling out in May, because that will also give us some other context to be able to use.
Thanks, Scott. There's also, we've been thinking and talking about some expansion of and some of this we've talked about before, expansion of history department projects and public history projects in connection with other departments. I was contacted by a member of the foundation who introduced me to a gentleman out of New York who is a media celebrity, shall we say. And he is writing his memoirs. He's retiring after 42 years in the business, and he's working on his memoirs, and he would like a student to research what they can find about his enslaved family members that were on the down in Pembroke, Kentucky, on the Buckner plantation. And this person is quite important. Actually, I guess I can tell you who his name is. It's Bruce Johnson. And so we talked about getting him a student to do research. In fact, we have a student in mind. And then we've discussed the possibility of turning what the student finds in connection with some local history about enslaved people and turning it into a class. And so that may take place as early as this summer. This gentleman wants to turn his memoirs into a documentary, and he's been negotiating from some people out of Hollywood to do that. He also I guess he has some famous relatives and quite a very interesting backstory. So we think this could be some, kind of a new direction. And I hate to drop this on you blind, Eric, but I'd like to see a closer partnership working with Black Studies and Public History. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I know that one of the challenges we have in this profession, and at least in public history, is that we've chosen to ignore so much of American history, especially history generated by underserved communities, as we're calling them, but women and African Americans and other indigenous peoples. And so the profession needs to look more like the history we represent. And that's important to me. It's important I would like to see the public history program at NKU become exceedingly underserved and minority friendly. We need that. The nation needs it. The profession needs it. And I think it's a niche that we can easily step into. We have a lot of representation here. We have a lot of support, and we have, within a 50-mile radius of where we're sitting, there's 100 museums. Just about any kind of museum you can name, it's here. So the opportunities are great.
So what are you dropping on me?
I just want to work with you and Black Studies.
Oh, okay.
Do projects together. I want to,
Oh,
you know,
I was just asking. I was looking for the punchline, and I'm like, where's the? I mean, the Historical Preservation Certificate Program was one of the entities. I think the other issue, as I talked to a friend of mine who's the president of the African American Museum Association out in Seattle, she and I have some conversations about how to get more African Americans into the museum world, but those haven't flushed out yet. So I think we've always had the connection. It's just to figure out how to do it more intentionally. The bigger issue is, because I have to jump off because I got another call here in like 10 minutes. The bigger issue is, my suggestion would be two things, Brian, is to figure out what exactly our group's mission or main focus would be, and then create some priorities. So we're not all over the place. Like if somebody calls you or calls me and say, I've got this project. And so we'll know if it fits into what we're doing or not, because I'm good at turning down things if I don't have time to do it. But the issue is, what are our goals here as a group, a working group, and what are the priorities? Because, for example, Chris was mentioning something, and I could say, okay, I saw this Digital Humanities NEH grant that may fit what you're doing. Let's figure out how to write this thing up and get $100,000 from NEH or something. So I need to know like some key terms and some key points that triggers me to think about our group, if that makes sense.
makes
Makes
very
sense.
good sense. Yeah, a very good sense, Eric. I think that's exactly what we need to do.
But I need to go. So are you co-hosting too? Because I think the recording may jump to you since you're co-hosting.
Okay, I am co-hosting, so.
So
you
I
know,
think
you-
the recording should jump to you too. I think.
Okay,
If not, I don't know what to tell you.
all right.
So I'm done talking.
I stopped the share for a few minutes. Don't give it so much.
All right.
Hey, Burke, I see the link you sent. When was that done?
When they announced his
Retirement?
retirement not too long ago.
Okay.
He's a NKU graduate and was our commencement speaker 2 years ago.
Very cool.
And started his career at CPO before moving to DC.
He's quite an impressive guy. I think he grew up three streets down from Muhammad Ali, and he knows, I mean, he's a personal friend of Barack Obama, and you know, he's kind of an interesting guy. Might be good for us. It still says it's recording, so I like that.
It's
Okay.
saying that because I'm still on here.
I know. So it seems like we're losing people and people have to go, but
Yeah, they do.
I think Eric has a great point about our priorities and what our goals should be. I guess
I'm
I'm
not
at a
saying-
loss of what I
I'm not
should.
saying you should resolve it now. I'm saying at some point you can have people think about it for our next meeting to figure out if we have a mission or some priorities for our next meeting. I'm not saying we should dive into that big old discussion now. That's,
No, I don't think we should either. I'm
It'll
just
take a
wondering
while.
if we should send out a poll.
yeah.
Are there any thoughts about how we can sort of coalesce this stuff?
I mean, you can just drop them in the buckets of historical preservation, K through 12 education, higher education. I mean, just figure out some big buckets.
Okay,
And then
makes sense.
and then figure out if you want to drill down on the bigger buckets, and then figure out the priorities after that. I mean, you already have some of that stuff in your meeting from last time, and then some of your outline. Just create some big buckets and then go from there.
Thanks, Eric.
So that's what I'm thinking.
Jennifer, I keep looking to you. You're good at thinking into the, have you thought?
Congratulations.
I'm actually with Eric. Yeah, no, I think, yeah. I mean, look, the thing is that at this point, you've limited people power, right? Limited number of graduate students to be able to assign all these tasks. And I think that the other thing is that, you have to assess the skill level of your graduate students and find out, what are they going to be capable of doing, right?
Right.
And that's fine too, because then they can that it'd be much easier to sort of focus them on certain things, right? And in addition to what their aspirations are and why they're there and what they intend to do with it. So, and I think that you also have to have somebody who you can assign to each one of those buckets to be in charge of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes really good sense. Burke is always telling me I need to use my students better. And maybe he can.
I think that's true. And I also think that, you have so many great ideas and so much energy, but we've got to figure out how to focus some of that so that we can achieve publications and presence at conferences. I still think it would not be a bad idea to hold a conference at NKU and bring people to NKU, because then, that's a whole different sort of way of dealing with it. You're not actually projecting it, you're bringing it in, then you can publish the entire conference proceeding. It can be a joint conference.
Greg's got basically a group that he is, are you still president of that group?
Well, I use all kinds of titles interchangeably depending on this, but I'm the director of the state of Ohio of basically a tri-state group called the National Ohio River National Freedom Corridor. And we've been up in this group of volunteers, each, involved with their own local historic societies, which have some Underground Railroad connections. And so we're still, again, we still have a little bit of a pulse, but in what we're talking about here was part of the vision of that group. And the ultimate goal was to create a national heritage area of our local histories. So all the things we're talking about are again, fit right into the mission of that group. And again, we talked about, we've done 3 conferences, fairly successful for a bunch of amateurs. And that's why I've always, again, envisioned partnering with NKU because you have the resources that we lack as a local volunteer group. And it's a perfect fit. And everything we've been talking about in these meetings, again, like I said, are very much part of what we'd like to have accomplished for the region.
I think we need to, then that I think has got to be sort of a small group brainstorm session and figure out how we can put together a conference, because it's not, conferences aren't really that difficult to put together, right? It just takes time and a really specific list. I've done it before. I'm doing it right now for the Midwest World History Association. So it's sort of like, it's not hard to do. It's party planning. We can do this.
Yeah, Eric has run a couple national conferences as well, so he's got a lot of experience with it.
Yes, I have war
Like
stories.
the start of a small committee.
I have a war stories for you. Don't do this. Do this. Okay.
Well, we can figure that out. But I think I think that would really be an excellent goal, because the thing is that, this is sort of where it's happening in terms of the public history piece, preservation piece. UC's never been able to get it off the ground. Miami hasn't been able to really get it off the ground. So let's just take it.
Although I have contacts at UC that I've talked to before who had a preliminary conversation about a regional public history conference. So I think if we put it together, they will come, as the saying goes.
Absolutely.
It could be two organizations, Public History and Freedom Corridor stuff. Yeah.
So it's like if you have a conference bucket or a publication bucket, a preservation, but I mean, it's just figuring out these different buckets and then putting somebody in charge of them, and then kind of, and I'm not volunteering. I'm just putting it out there.
You are really good at saying no.
I'm not volunteering. I just came off of a month of so many presentations. I am totally burnt out on so much stuff, but maybe in April or May, I might have more energy.
Well, Brian, you and I can look at the list if you want to, and we
I'd
can
appreciate that.
Yeah,
I
we can
really
do like a
appreciate
first
that.
pass at it, and then we can, and we can see what we think.
I'm always good to meet anytime. And if there's food present, I'm always for that too.
You sound like a grad student.
I sound like a what?
A grad student.
I just finished making 2 dozen hot chocolate bombs for seniors who are remote. I can bring some of those.
I was
I'm
thinking,
good at it now.
I was thinking about pretzels and beer cheese.
Oh my gosh.
I have a limited imagination. If
Well,
it's always-
we'll figure that out.
yeah, well, that's great. That's good.
Well, I think your numbers are dwindling. You're down to 9.
They are. Scott had to go get his COVID shot,
Oh, wow.
and so
Must be nice.
I think we've made some good progress today. I will, if the recording comes back to me, or if it comes to you, Eric, would you just shoot the link to me and I'll distribute it?
If you end the meeting within the next 5 to 10 minutes, it'll come to me. If you don't, I'm not sure where it will go.
Okay. I think I think unless somebody has something pressing that they want to talk about, I think that we can wrap it up. We got quite a bit through our agenda, not completely through, but to be honest with you, there was a lot to talk about. But I feel good that we're making really good progress. So.
Okay.
And Jennifer will be talking, Burke will be talking, Eric will be talking, Katie will be talking, Greg will be talking, David will be talking, Chris will be talking, Vanessa will be talking. So we got a lot to do, a lot to think about, but you've given me some clear direction, so I appreciate it.
Thanks,
Anybody?
Brian.
What?
Thank you.
I said thank you.
Oh, thank you. This is fun. Oh, I want to show you something before you guys leave. Scott arranged for a privy dig at the old Green Derby Tavern. It will start probably Monday. Well, we were walking the site and I picked up this bottle and it says Newport Mineral Water Company, Newport, Kentucky, registered, capacity 7.5 ounces. It's got a broken top. It's a pretty early bottle, but what's neat about it is that this same aquifer is now being used by the New Riff Distillery to make bourbon.
Wow.
So if you go and buy some bourbon, this is the stuff you're gonna wanna try.
I need bourbon. That's what I need.
So I will let you go. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
See you later.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.